Hello again, everyone. Today, we want to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that is how do you get your taxes in retirement to be as close to 0% tax bracket as possible. And what's really fun here is that a lot of you can actually get to a 0% tax bracket in retirement. You might not realize it, or if you can't, because not everyone can, if you can't get to zero, a lot of times you can get a lot closer than maybe you realize. So this is going to be a great conversation. Now, again, this is part of our Retire Right process. RIGHT is an acronym standing for risk, income, growth, healthcare, and of course, taxes. All right, let's dive in. But before we do, I want to make sure that you know my partner here in crime today. This is Benny. I like to call him Benny the Tax Monster. He works for the IRS. We don't like him. We think he's ugly and hideous and mean. There's nothing about Benny we like. Our job today is to make Benny really, really unhappy. We want him to be an unhappy camper. And so my goal is to teach you how to make him not happy. All right, enough with Benny. Let's go ahead and let's talk about how do you get to a 0% tax bracket, or if you can't get there, as close as possible. Now we're going to do a little bit of tax geekiness here. Stay with me, I promise it won't be much. But whenever you look at how taxes work, you fill out the front page of your tax return, and essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to calculate something known as AGI, or adjusted gross income. That's what AGI stands for. Then you subtract from that number your deductions, right? And it used to be in the older tax code, there were personal exemptions and deductions, and we might itemize deductions. But in the current tax code, everybody kind of has the standard deduction, or they might have itemized deductions. Personal exemptions have pretty much gone away. But in a couple of years, they're going to come back. So your deduction, I'll put and PE, personal exemptions, for when they return, right? But the idea is, okay, here we've got our adjusted gross income, we subtract our deductions, and that gives us something called taxable income. Taxable income. Now, in order to get at a 0% tax bracket, which is what we want, we need this taxable income to be less than or equal to what? 0. That's the goal. How do we get our AGI? So said another way, how do we get our AGI right here to be a smaller number than our deductions and personal exemptions when the time comes? Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you are working, that's almost impossible because you're probably getting W-2 income or something like that. But let's talk about how to get income at less than 0. So in order to do that, I want you to think about this. There are really only 2 types of income. Okay, just 2 types of income. Over here, we have what I would call to be uncontrollable income. Now, what is that? Uncontrollable income would be income that you can't change no matter what. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Social Security is the first one that comes to mind. Now, you can control when you start Social Security. By controlling when you start it, you are also controlling how much you get. But once you turn it on, it's on. You can't change it. Once it's on, and it's going to be there for the rest of your life, right? It doesn't change once you've turned it on. So since you cannot change it, it is uncontrollable. What's another example? How about this one? Pension income. Pension income is also an uncontrollable source of income, meaning once you turn it on, they're just paying it out to you for the rest of your life, right? So like a company pension, or maybe you work for a school system or something like that. My dad, when he worked for State Farm, when he retired, he had both Social Security and a pension. He had both. And let's imagine, just picture this. Imagine my dad one month, looking at my mom saying, we've got this pension's coming in. We don't even need it. Our bank accounts is getting bigger and bigger. You know what? Why don't we just turn it off for a couple of months? We'll turn it on a couple of months later. So he calls up State Farm and says, yeah, you know how you're paying me that pension every month? Look, I don't really need the money. Can you just stop paying me for a few months? I'll call you when I'm ready for you to have it turned back on. I mean, what would the people at State Farm do in the pension department if my dad tried to do that? Or if you tried to do that with Social Security? I mean, everyone at the office would get a great laugh out of it, but nothing's going to happen. That money's coming to you no matter what. Now, there might be a couple of other sources of uncontrollable income, but in regards to taxes, those are pretty much it. The rest of it falls into the controllable category. And controllable is essentially, I'll put almost, because I might be missing something, but I'll say almost everything else. So here's what that means. If you have, and I'm going to highlight this guy right here. If you have a sizable pension, then getting to a 0% tax bracket is going to be pretty much impossible. Why? Because when you calculate your AGI, what are you doing? You're taking your some percentage of your Social Security plus 100% of your pension, and that gives you an AGI. By the time you subtract your deductions, you have some amount of money here that is greater than zero, right? And you can't control that. You can't control it. So for you, there is some tax that is uncontrollable that we would call, whatever that tax is, we would call that your minimum tax. Here's the problem. Most people in this position are not paying their minimum. You're giving the IRS more money than you have to because you don't understand how to manage this part of the equation over here. The secret to getting to zero is managing your controllable assets and managing this relationship. All right? Now, I'm going to go into how to manage controllable assets. Before I do that, please understand, we are talking about taxes here. It's different for all of you. This guy over here, Benny, is big jerk Benny that we don't like. Benny, big jerk. He doesn't make it easy. He makes taxes super complicated, and it's very situational. This is why I always tell people, if you want to see how close to zero you can get, give us a call. We can help you out. Here's the deal. In order to get to zero, you have to understand the controllable side of things. So let's talk about it. When it comes to controllable assets, they are all going to fall into one of three tax buckets. All right. So the first tax bucket on the left, this is going to be, and it's in red because this is the ugly one, pre-tax accounts. What are pre-tax accounts? Well, you know what they are. 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, 457. All of these retirement accounts where you put money in and got a tax deduction up front, but guess what? Now you're going to owe taxes as the money comes out. Anything that might have a required minimum distribution attached to it at some point down the road, that's a pre-tax account. All right. This is the worst place to have money after, not before, after you retire, because this is the account that it can cause chaos on your tax return because every time you pull money out, it's taxable. The next bucket over here, we'll do that maybe blue. This is going to be your after-tax accounts. Now, after-tax money, what is that? These are individual accounts or joint accounts or trust accounts. These are accounts where maybe you've already paid tax and you have money invested. So a lot of times we see this, hey, what if you inherited money from your parents? After-tax money? Oh, you inherited a house from your parents. You sold the house, you invested the proceeds. This is an after-tax account. Maybe you had a house that you sold and invested the proceeds. Maybe, anything like that. You know what else is in this account that's a little bit more difficult to work with? With rental real estate. A lot of people invest in rental real estate, and if you do, usually it's with after-tax money. By the way, I'm begging you to God, I'm hoping to the good Lord above that you do not have real estate over here inside of your pre-tax accounts. Like some people, they have a self-directed IRA they use to buy real estate. That's a whole different discussion, but that's almost what you almost never want to do that. It's like, I want to do anything but that if you can avoid it. But anyway, most people, like rental real estate is over here in the after-tax side. And then the last tax bucket is right here. It is our tax-free bucket. Now, if you could wave a magic wand and have all of your money in just one bucket, where do we want it? You got it. We want it over here. So what's tax-free? Anything that starts with the word Roth is probably a good starting point. Roth IRA, Roth 401k, Roth 403b, etc. Properly designed life insurance falls in this bucket. Now, heads up, properly designed life insurance is really most appropriate if you're reasonably healthy and you have over $1 million in your retirement in these pre-tax accounts on the left. So other than that, focus more on the Roth side of things. Now, here's the deal. We're talking about how do we manage assets? It's really pretty easy. What are we trying to do? We are trying to get everything moved over into these tax-free accounts as fast as possible. You want these pre-tax accounts moved over. You want after-tax accounts, like everything you can. You want over in the tax-free bucket. And guess what? Where are we going to start? We're going to start with the worst offender of the list, right over here. That's where we're going to start. I want you to focus on how can you get your IRA dollars, your 401k, 403bs over to Roth IRAs as fast as you can. By the way, remember, with a caveat, everyone's tax situation is different. Please make sure you have someone that understands tax planning, not tax preparation. Tax planning, looking over your shoulder, making sure you're making the right choices here. But you want to get, especially these guys over here, you want to get them into tax-free as fast as you can. Now, what's the disadvantage? What's the problem? What's the big, oh my gosh, what's the big problem with that? Well, the problem is for every dollar you move from pre-tax over to tax-free, guess what? This ugly guy to my right, Benny, wants a cut. Benny's like, hands out, I want my cut. If you move $100,000 from your IRA to a Roth IRA, he wants tax on $100,000 of income in that year. So you gotta, basically, what I'm talking about doing here, it's ripping off the Band-Aid. It's how do you take off a Band-Aid? Not a little bit of time. You rip that baby off fast. And I'm telling you that if you want to get to a 0% tax bracket in retirement, or at least as low of a tax bracket as you can, you got to get those pre-tax accounts moved over. You just have to. Part of the deal. The key is doing it in the most tax efficient way possible. That's going to be different for every one of you. That's why I always tell you, just call us. We'll help you, right? Once you get that figured out, the next step is, and I'll do this in blue. So in big old red, this is one, right here. Step 2 is going to be working on after-tax. By the way, you could also, with step 2, with your after-tax accounts, I should have said this, you want to make them as tax efficient as possible. You can do that right out of the gate, right? There's no reason to delay on that. You want these accounts to be as tax, here, I'm going to move this up a little bit, the word tax efficient as possible. The problem is most financial firms, like if you own mutual funds, for example, they are not the most tax efficient things in the world. You want to be owning individual stocks, ETFs, things like that. You don't want to be holding mutual funds for the most part because of the lack of tax efficiency. And rental income, oh my gosh, people have rental, they're like, oh, I can't sell my rental. I guess I just have to deal with it. I can't sell it because I'm depending on the income. I can't sell it because, oh, it's in such a high growth market part of the area or whatever. If you don't want to sell your rental income, that's fine. Just recognize getting to 0% tax bracket is going to be harder for you. It's reality, right? But the key is you either want all after tax to be tax efficient as possible and all pre-tax to be as close to tax-free or in Roth as possible, or properly designed life insurance, or a combination. If you do this, once you have accomplished this, then when you count, you start saying, okay, well, what would be my adjusted gross income for the year? Well, what's going to show up on your tax return now? Well, your Social Security. It's about all that's going to show up on your tax return. But the way Social Security is taxed, essentially the percentage of your Social Security that's going to end up being taxed is going to be very, very, very close to zero. Hardly any of it's going to be taxed. Almost none of it's going to be taxed. And at the end of the day, it's almost definitely going to be a number that is less than your deductions / personal exemptions when they come back. In other words, you're like, oh, look, my adjusted gross income, which is only Social Security because all other income's coming from Roth, or in my after-tax accounts are tax efficient, so they're not kicking out hardly anything, right? If you set that up the right way, basically all that's left on your tax return is Social Security. Voila! If that's all you've got, it's going to be pretty much tax-free. And that's a beautiful thing, right? So how do you get to tax-free? How do you get to a 0% tax bracket? Hey, it's right up here. Control your controllable assets in a tax-efficient way. And the reality is, this is different for everyone. If there were one way to do it, I'd show it to you here. It's different for everyone. You want to have, and by the way, you want to have not a tax preparer. See, whenever it comes to taxes, you have tax preparers and you have tax planners, right? And tax preparer, those are the people that put the right numbers in the right boxes during tax season. This is not who you want. You want this person. Someone that says, no, let's meet in the summertime or the fall. Let's look at your tax return where it is now. Let's see where you are going if you keep staying on the road you're on. Let's see what adjustments we can make to get you to a better place. That's what a tax planner is. That's what you need. Make sure you're talking to the right people there. So with that, if you want to give us a shout, we're happy to talk to you. Also, if you haven't checked it out yet, click the link below. It takes you to our website. I recorded a quick 5-minute video. Actually, it's less than 5 minutes on answering the question, how do you know when you have enough to retire? If you haven't checked it out yet, you really should. All right, gang, hope this helps. Questions below, thumb up, subscribe, like the video, all that good stuff. And we will see you next time.